Hi, and welcome everyone. This is Varleigh at Lavender Sky Panther with you on Saturday, January 24th, 2026. And pardon the shift. If anybody was looking forward to seeing this at 10 p.m. starting Eastern, it's starting now at 11 p.m. Eastern. That was unavoidable. Anyway, again, welcome. We're going to go on quite a fun journey in this show. Much like the last show, I'm going to be weaving a story with a lot of different threads, so to speak. So I was, kind of divinely given a theme for today, and actually I posted some things in anticipation of the show to try to, get the spirits up for it. And I posted something a little early because I was given one subject line coming through, but then it shifted and changed, and now it's morphed into something totally different. So, but anyway, let me just hop into this. So as you can see, we have, I'm going to, put this up. I do old school style slides. This is all in a PowerPoint presentation, but I prefer to print things out. I'm very hands-on tactile, and I've got my nautical theme. As you can see, we're talking Greeks, creeks, ANKHs or ANKHs and anchors. So here's the, I put the little title thing up, cover slide up just to kind of mark the show. Oops, sorry, it's also a way for me to kind of gauge there. I'm going to need to come back a bit. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in here. And much like the thoughts and people use the word downloads these days when you're intuitive and you're getting messages coming through the ethers, so to speak, from some divine source. A lot was just pouring through for the show. Just a lot. So what I'm going to do is, stick to the order and the structure of these slide printouts that I have. And then I'm going to off-road it a bit. I may meander and wander, all over the place, but that's just the style and nature of these things. As things come through, I may bring them up. Now, inevitably, I'm not even going to hit or touch on all the points that I really, really want to. So since that's the case, after this airs, what I've been doing in the last couple of shows is over the course of the 24 to 48 hours after the show airs, I start filling up the description box with a lot of reference materials. And if I didn't get it, touch on it in the show, but I think it's an important, relevant topic, or, be fun for anyone else for any of you out there to go and check it out further, then I will just, put links in the description area. Hold on, I didn't do something over here. I'll put links in the description area, and then that's just, kind of food for thought. And if you want to go down those, what I call now badger holes, I think I've given up using the phrase rabbit holes. It's just too overused at this point. I'm done. So anyway, let's get into this. So as the title says, we're talking, first I'll start breaking down the title. So we've got Greeks and Creeks, meaning Creek Native Indian tribe. Then we have ANKHs and anchors. And then there's kind of a third category that's not really showing up in that title that we're going to talk about too, and that's going to be the hippocampus. And that's the mythological sea creature, often shown in mosaics and things. I think I referenced it on one of my other shows. And it is the head of the horse, and then the tail has been described in ancient writings, or actually I'd say it's not much in writings, mostly in depictions and pictures, is either like a fish tail, almost like a mermaid body. Some say it's more serpentine, some say it's more whale-like, depending on the artist's depictions. But that's an interesting topic too, because actually it first came to my attention, it came on the radar of Mila over at Higher Vibrations YouTube channel. I highly recommend you go check that out. But she had hippocampus, that whole theme on the brain, and that leads into a lot of things. So let's just start with that. So I'm going to hold up another slide here and go over the etymology first of the things in the title. So I'm going to touch on, Greek, creeks, ankh, anchor, and get into hippocampus. I'm also looking at things like the letter M, because in Greek, it kind of ties into water eventually, kind of an amalgamation from Phoenician and Hebrew and Egyptian languages. And by the time you get into Greek, there's a kind of connection with water. And so is the M in the Phoenician letters, stands for water, but also I'm going to say memory. Now, depending on what you research online these days, what are we going to do? I feel like taking a whole stack of papers and throwing them up in the air, because when we go to do searches now, I don't know about you, but just basic searches, I'm trying to find out even basic definitions of things. And what do I get? thrown in my face all this corporate crap, excuse my language, but acronyms and things having to do with corporations, video games, nothing to do with just the basics of what, hey, I just want a basic definition or basic this or that. Same thing with the AI overviews. They're throwing in one set of information, and then depending upon how you ask the question of what you're researching or looking for, you'll get a totally different answer. So guess what? As I said in the last show, first I was kind of really ticked off at AI. It can be a blessing and a curse. It can be helpful, I guess, in its processing information, but it also can really screw you up and be, deliberately in its own weird way, giving mistruths. Or so it's just, much like the theme, we're going to go into the seas and the high seas. It's just how you navigate it, and it really does depend on how you craft, again, another nautical term, the questions. And again, you're going to get a totally different answer. So here's what I have to say about that. I'm very grateful for my vintage in years, because now I'm trying to bridge what I know to be true through experiences and traveling in different places in the world, seeing things with my own eyes, my physical eyes, but also intuiting, with my third eye or my inner sight. And because that's where we're going to all start to be putting what is true in the world as we create things going forward is going to be coming from that place, not from book knowledge. Okay, I very much see that, like I'm going to go over the physical medical part of the hippocampus, which is located in the brain, through this, beautiful book, illustrated, decades and decades ago, beautiful images by Frank D. Netter, great artist, medical artist. But nowadays, that's great, and it's all book knowledge, and I can see technically, okay, parts and things that I would never know if I didn't, look at a book like this. But if I try to research the same things that are in this actual very old book, and try to look online, I'm going to see a lot of different thoughts. So these days, what I'm doing right now, I guess, is I kind of just fell into this. And I'm looking at the clock. It's 11:11 for anybody who's into the numbers. You know what that means. I'll do a little shout out for an Australian blog site called Joanne Sacred Scribes. I think her name is Joanne Walmsley. And type in any number, 1 digit, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want, and number combination, and it will give you the positive aspects of that number. So it's just an aside. But anyway, what I want to say is things are rapidly changing with kind of information, partial truths, skewed truths. What are we looking at? What kind of reality? It's like our old reality is kind of falling away. A new one wants to emerge, and we're kind of in the mush pot is how I feel. But it's okay to be in the mush pot because we can just take things and, again, go within and feel it out. What feels true. We're the barometer for the truth now. And so it's very, very important. Anyway, let me not go down too much that little tangent there. But I think before I get into the etymology further and talk about more of this, I'm going to take a break and go back to the beginning where I meant to go. I'm holding up this little beach rock because I wasn't going to do a crystal of the day or anything. But then something said, yes, I am. And I'm going to do this. It's more of like a sandstone kind of rock off a beach in Florida. And it actually, strangely enough, kind of looks like a tooth. It's a little strange. And that reminds me to, I don't think it shows up with the lighting, a little bit like a tooth. Yeah, I think you can see it, like a tooth. Anyway, that brings me further to remind that as things are changing, the old world is kind of falling away. And what I mean by that is, I think if you found this channel, you know that just something feels very different these days, especially since obviously 2020. And I don't know, increasingly each year, I'm like, what are we in? We're kind of in between worlds is what I feel like, because there's the old story, again, getting back to my previous live show about emphasis on story, the story of what was before. And then there's a story not yet quite formulated yet. And we're in the in between. And so anyway, what I want to say is the old story will say, you do this, you get up, you go to school or you go to a job and you go at these times. It's very structured. This is how everybody's done it. And you be a good little, duck and follow in a row. Well, now, no, ducks can fly. They can swim off. They can go wherever they want. We're going to wander. And that's the nature of where we're headed next. No kind of oppressive system and structure. Now, if you're somebody who likes that kind of structure and you feel good and thrive in that, great. But I would say that if you're here, you probably do not. I do not resonate with that whatsoever. So what I want to say is we've got to take the best of like the old and where we might be headed and kind of fuse them together as a good little in between moment, before we really go on into yet another shift and bigger change. And what I mean by bigger shift and change is moving out of like this 3D dense kind of material, physical material matrix, as they call it, as we move and get lighter, physically lighter, in a spiritual sense, even more into a light body. And as we move up into higher dimensions, which are beautiful places to be because they do not include things like murder, death, and all these, killings and whatever else, very low vibed things. And again, if you found this channel, I think you would, vote say, no, thank you. Let's have a more beautiful world. That's where we're headed. And so we are shifting out of this denser world. And again, not judging it. It's just a place to be lower, denser, higher, lighter. And it's just like saying, do you want chocolate milk or do you want water? Like you choose one, you want yet again something else. So it's a preference. Now, that being said, since this stone is kind of reminding me of a tooth a bit, it's just bringing up also the old world might use a lot of like, I'm not going to put judgment on it, but fairly harmful to the resonance of the body, um, like, numbing things. Um, I'm missing the word. It's been a long day. Certain treatments that maybe aren't so friendly to the body, the natural harmony state of the body. So, this tooth thing is just reminding me. So maybe now we start to, of course, if there's certain surgeries or things that are absolutely necessary, those might need to be done. But also we can work with saltwater rinses in the mouth, doing kind of some dental hygiene in different ways than just using. Everyone's of course been talking about, oh, the toothpaste, they calcify and mess up the third eye, da 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 da. Depending on where you at spiritually, yes or no. But I think, instead of that, we're looking at other natural solutions, but like saltwater rinses. And then if there's any kind of infections, one might be able to play around with using clove essential oil, plus, connecting in prayer, talking to other people if it's hard to do it yourself, getting somebody else who's like a natural healer and come in and help you envision and help you, heal. I've done a lot of healings myself because I know it's possible. And, like on an injured knee or whatever, it's very possible. You can do that, just by connecting in with higher source or divine source or your higher self, however you want to look at it. And you can also go and do things like crystal healing. That's worked. I have done that on people, even in trauma rooms in the hospital, and it has absolutely worked. Also essential oils to use, for healing, aromatherapies. There's so many things, and especially frequency. So like singing bowls, all of that really does work. I've passed a singing bowl over somebody and worked on treating them, and it was reducing a tumor, for example. And how do I know? Because I saw the before scans and the after ones after I've been working with it for a while. So I had gotten that validation. So that's just what I mean. It's not like we throw out all the other knowledge, but we use the best of everything. And, as we move forward and get to a newer, better way, hopefully, when it's more harmonious and that feels good, on the body. I don't know why I just went there, but I went there for a reason. That's why you never know what will come up in these shows. Anyway, I hope this is all working out and streaming correctly. Okay, I hope so. If not, oh well. Anyhow, let's get into the breakdown and the etymologies then. I'll stick more to the script, so to speak, with my slides. So all that to say, okay, we have on the medical side, I did, show this book, The Atlas of the Human Anatomy. This is just showing what the hippocampus in the brain is right in here. And then this is one example of the hippocampus. And I'm going to jump around. So the hippocampus, the etymology of that, because this is going to become relevant at the end of the show for a very fascinating topic, which will relate to all of this. But the hippocampus, the hippo part is Greek hippos, meaning horse, campos, meaning sea monster. And that actually in the Greek mythology, and if you look at my previous show, I recommend that because I talk about the gods and turf wars. And in this case, they're back in this message in this show because we're talking about now sea, like everything to do with the sea and sea gods will show up here and there. But anyway, the hippocampus supposedly pulled Poseidon, or the Roman counterpart, that's the Greek god Poseidon, and Roman counterpart was Neptune. But anyway, the hippocampus supposedly pulls the chariot. Okay. And that's what's interesting with that too, is like we have the term horsepower, so that's interesting. In this case, it's like horse slash fish or dolphin or whale power, because it's combined animal or being. And it's also interesting when we talk about hippocampus, there's other words like hippodrome, hippopotamus. Well, hippopotamus is also Greek because we've got the hippo for horse and what is it? Potamos. I think it's potamos is Greek for river. So that would be like horse and river together, the hippopotamus, which makes sense. It inhabits the river. I think it even walks along, the ground under the water on the riverbed. And then in German, the word for hippopotamus is Nilpferd, which is Nile horse. So again, a horse of the river. Anyway, that's the little aside portion of the show. And let me get back to the main etymologies for Greeks and Creeks and ANKHs and ANKHs. So the Greek, apparently, now again, I'm asking when I say I'm weaving a story, a lot of this is going to be based on experiences and stuff I know to be true with physical sight and physical eyes. Also, a lot of intuitive, kind of hits on what's going on. Does this feel right? Does this feel true of what I'm reading? When I also look in, internet search. So some stuff you may say, well, I don't think that's true at all. Well, this show is for you because I absolutely invite you to everything that I'm talking about, feel into it, and even be inspired. Hopefully it inspires you and you use this as a springboard to go look further or feel into it further of what you feel to be true. And this is not like, oh, somebody is right, somebody's teaching me. This is an open, wide open environment. Like I've said before in the last show, it's like dream interpretation. Everybody, you have a dream. It's very specific and personal to you. But you may say, you know what, I just can't figure out that dream. Somebody help me out. And say, 10 people in front of you, and you say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And the one that's going to be true is the one that resonates with you. Like the one person that, says it, and you're like, that's it. You got it. Or you might get a lot of little bells ringing off on a lot of people, parts and pieces they're talking about seem true. So this is what I'm talking about. We're in a new era now going forward where, we can't just read anything at face value anymore. Like my example I just said, I did an internet search for the same topic. Depending on how I got the question, I got a totally different answer. So it's almost like forcing us to go within to put this all together. So what I'm doing is just laying out little pieces. Like we can call it puzzle pieces. That's what a lot of people like to say. It's pieces of a puzzle. We're all putting it together. I have one piece, you have another piece. Everyone has their own little pieces. In this case, I'm going to talk in terms of like threads, and we're weaving a story. So I may have a bunch of thread over here. You've got some other colors and textures and whatever. And we just put all this together. And I just want to say hi, Roxy girl. I hope I said that right, Roxy girl. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So anyway, okay. So the Greeks. So again, based on what I could research, say apparently in the internet research is that they called themselves the Hellenes. Okay. Now, where have we heard Helene in recent news? We will touch on this at the very end of the show about the Hurricane Helene. Then, supposedly, the actual Greek word, though, comes from Graikoi, if I'm saying it right, a tribe in Epirus, or Grekas, Old English. So supposedly Greeks comes more from a term given by, Old English. Now, again, dive down there, pull that thread, see what you get. What do you think, where that name really comes from? You might find yet another origin, but we'll just stick with these for now. All right, now Creeks, for like the Native American Creek Indians, I couldn't really find anything conclusive. So again, depending on how you ask in the internet search, it will say, no, Creeks don't relate to the word Greek whatsoever. And then you ask a different way, and then it says, yes, they do. So I feel they do. And the reason why I'm going to say that is Creek is just one example going along Greek. Some say Cherokee also has ties with the Greeks. But if you look at old photographs, the Creek, basically, they lived mostly in, the eastern coast and southeast of the North America. And they inhabited Georgia, Florida, and Alabama primarily. Well, those are all, facing the east, the water, the Atlantic. And we know that the Greeks would have come over from, that direction, across the Atlantic. And so it doesn't seem out of question that they would have had contact with each other. There's a YouTube video I posted, kind of as like pre-research if anybody wanted to look at any of that before I'm doing the show. And a woman did tie it together, saying there's a bunch of words that are the same in Greek that are, used in some of these Native American languages. And also, she even went further to say that some of the Native Americans settling around or who were established around Lake Superior, that even their DNA is linked with Greek DNA, and that they excavated, or I guess it's not known if they did, somebody did in that region where they also were, took out massive amounts of copper. And that's going to come up later in the show too. There's some kind of connection between areas in the ancient world and history where they were doing shipbuilding. It was also went like hand in hand with copper mining. So we'll get to that coming up. But let me not get too far ahead of myself. So for creeks, when I was doing the research, nobody would, say, oh, yes, it is. No, it isn't. Some of the internet search would say, that's fringe theory. And the more they say that, usually, it's like you're onto the right track. I think we all experienced that lately. But anyway, it stands to reason. I'm going to show some shipping routes that, it said even that people in the Mediterranean, they would come up past England, Ireland, go up even further north, and then hop over to Iceland, to Greenland, to Canada. That's how they could easily come down into Lake Superior area if, they came from there or traded through there. So, very plausible. It seems very possible to me. Okay, now we'll look at Ankh, an ancient Egyptian. Supposedly it's deriving from the hieroglyphics involving to live, life, or like to live, or breath, giving life, that type of concept. Then we have anchor, original Greek from ankura, and it was a form to anchor to moor, could mean crooked or hook. So I'm going to, put this together later why I'm bringing them up. I think, it's kind of, I'll bring this up in other slides, but, from the cover slides, there's your ankh and there's your anchor. So you see the loop and the cross and a straight piece, and you see, a little loop, a cross piece and a straight piece. And this one now is just adding, arc or hook at the bottom. And, the ankhs are being held by somebody, in like burial state. And then I don't have it on this one, but there's a picture of somebody holding this like a handbag, from the handle. And so what I'm going to say, and I'll jump ahead of myself a little bit, is that I do see a relationship between these two because they both kind of serve the same purpose. I'm going to go on and say, because I'm going to talk about the ankh and electricity, and we're going to get into all kinds of stuff. But what I'm going to say is the way I saw somebody holding this and this pointing downward, it hit me right away again. So I'm talking about going by intuition. There's book knowledge, there's intuition, there's experiences, there's divine moments coming through the ethers. And for me, right away, it screamed grounding. It screamed that the ankh is very much something to do with a component of the electrical world and what it does within an electrical circuit or somewhere around there. And I'll get into that. But anyway, the way the person was holding it and it's pointed downward just reminded me of grounding somehow. And there's a picture, a tablet, it's Assyrian or Mesopotamian, I don't know if it's the same thing, but there was a winged being that was carrying it, and there was a non-winged being, like it looked like a regular person who didn't carry it. And there was one in front of each other in a line. And I'm like, to me, the winged beings maybe needed to use this to stay grounded on the earth plane, whereas the other person didn't need it, right? Just a theory. Anyhow, the holding of these across the chest also shows me that feels to me very much like a grounding thing to do. Just, calming and grounding. And if it was a body in rest, if it were past deceased, that would make all the more sense too, that it would be grounded. Now, there are going to be other theories. Other people have other ideas. Great. Let's put them all on the table and talk about them. Maybe they, serve some other purpose. They could say, no, that's just eternal life, whatever symbol of eternal life going into the next realm. Okay, fine. It could be more than one thing. Now, looking at this too, we talked about hippocampus and now some of the etymology of these things. We're also going to look at some symbols. I want to jump back to the Greek and Creek connection because these happen to be variations of I think I should just pull up my slides on this. Hang on. Variations of the Phoenician language, the letter symbol thet or tet. Hold on. And that becomes theta in the Greek. So there's, here we go. I'm going to go out of order on my slides. This might be dangerous, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's throw caution to the wind. Okay, I'm going to throw this one up. So the connection between the Greeks and the Creek and Native Americans. Okay, so up here, this goes now into Phoenician and Hebrew, where we have this, round symbol with the X through it. And then coming down, that becomes theta in Greek. Okay, so I just put down further the medicine wheel. It's got that, on angle, just like this, just filled in with some colors. So that's a very, strong symbol. I think eventually that symbol has a relation to mean good. So that would make sense that this overall thing has a good connotation. But anyway, I just see that's like a direct connection there. Somebody put together different variations of the letter tet or teth. It's spelled T-E-T or T-E-T-H. So to me, that's very much got a Hebrew, Phoenician, Egyptian feel, And in one description of the medicine wheel, it talks about the four directions, north, south, east, and west, obviously. Some traditions, Native American traditions say it is also the races, like four races. And then others say, no, absolutely, it's not that. So again, here's the thing. We got one group saying one thing, one another. I agree that I don't think that is representing the four colors of the four peoples of the earth at all, because I know there's at least five or more. And looking further into the history here on my channel in the post section, I put a video up on the origins of what's going on between where the Greeks coming from, Phoenicians, how do they all navigate, what's going on with those peoples. And when I was looking further and studying the medicine wheel, one gentleman, Native American, was talking about, again, the oral traditions and how they see the medicine wheel. And he was tying it very strong into galactic energies, and that their histories were saying that there were five peoples that were dropped off on the planet kind of all at the same time. And to me, that makes sense, because I've heard even, for better or for worse, Putin in Russia was talking in an interview about the history of Russia. And he brought up, like in the 700s, it started somewhere near Novgorod, and, you track the people through the countries. And like everywhere seems to kind of have a similar timeline and more, I don't want to say like modern peoples, but there seems to be a core period around like 700, 800, where maybe AD, where people just dropped off. And then there's a whole bunch of people happening even before that. So that might have been pre-Diluvian, pre-flood. And, we just get, I think there's just core times where different people showed up for different reasons and coming from all kinds of locations. So possibly from E.T. Craft, possibly coming up from Inner Earth. Again, this is looking very much, it's also another Native American symbol. You just turn this, straight, so it's not on angle. And this to me looks like in my previous shows, where that looks like the opening to Inner Earth, from the North Pole, or maybe even the South Pole, that this represents intersection, center point would be like a portal. This one over here with a circle and a dot in it is often depicted to be the sun. And to me, that dot in the middle is a portal from which all life springs. And that's a very Egyptian thing too. So again, I'm going to drop it there, because I could go down a lot of other badger holes and take us off course. So, but anyway, just food for thought. Any of these things I show you just meant to be, hey, maybe there's something to it I want to look at, or no, thank you. So before I get into some of the Greek trade routes, I just want to pull up, do I want to pull up this first? Let me see. Yeah, why not? Okay, I'm going to pull this up first, because I was just showing you the Phoenician letters, some Hebrew letters, Greek letters. And what do we have here? Bam. Wait, I'll get my pen there, right? There we go. There's that symbol, the cross and the circle. That's why I was saying it relates sometimes to the sun, because in this rock, carving, there's I don't know how to say this. I was going to look it up. You might know out there. Forgive me if I say it wrong. But a triremes, the Greek ship, is this thing over here. Sorry, I'm backwards. Anyway, so this is carved. So you got the ship, and then you got these rays coming down. So it's alluding that this is the sun. And again, that's that symbol, right? So anyway, it all interconnects, is my point. Obviously in the Egyptian cultures, we see so many forms of this too, and the importance of the sun. And to me, it's even more important because it's not just the sun, it's a portal from whence, a lot of us came. So anyway, that's just different views of the ship. We've got the horse's head. I did look up, the typical kind of Viking we associate. I think this is a Viking boat. They say it's Greek, but I think that's Viking. Over here would be more the Greek ship, and because that's a Viking longboat, and this is this thing, the triremes, if I'm saying it right, triremes. And then here's another view with the oars, and then this gives you a little breakdown of what's going on. And here's just another like stylized view back in the time of how they depicted that ship. And a lot of times on one portion, they put that eye, that like protective or like evil eye kind of symbol. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I'm just showing that ship also here because we'll get into that. But, kind of gives the feel for Greeks and travel. I'm going to get into showing some of the, seafaring routes, and I'm going to explain why. But before I do that, I just want to point to this. This is a little prop that I actually made. This sucker took me like 8 hours to make. And I started off by finding the background to the longboat. Now in this case, it's Viking, but just bear with me. It's kind of loosely connected with the Greek ships they're sailing around at that time. So anyway, when I first went to go make this thing, and it's to hold, like, it was for a party. It holds like things inside of it. But anyway, I was looking up images and I was getting really educated on the Viking longboats. And one of the first images I found, and this is going to tie in later, was a copper sculpture of a Viking longboat. And this one, it's got the serpent or the dragon head and all the shields across and then the oars. And again, it just really hit me because in the course of like diving into all kinds of topics, something kept coming up, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, about the connection of wherever there was shipbuilding going on, there were copper mines as well, like it went hand in hand. Again, the copper kind of triggered my memory of this. And I'm going to skip way ahead. I wasn't going to do this. But even to the extent that copper tied with ships, it's just, when you think about it, copper and salt water can make a battery. If you look into that, can't tell you the mechanics. I'd have to look it up myself, but that's involved. Copper conducts water, and copper is great for anti-corrosive. So they say like sometimes copper nails would have been used, or maybe even some plating used. But I just, can't help but think there's more to it, because there's even a story in Yemen where, there's shipbuilding going on and also copper mines. And at the ancient Yemen, I'm talking, it would have been Queen of Sheba over that jurisdiction. And she apparently had some kind of connection with King Solomon. And it's reported that a ton of copper was going over there. So again, when I was talking about the Native Americans around Lake Superior, there was something about all these copper mines along there were found to be missing tons and tons. Well, I don't know if literal tons, but, a lot of copper material. And that YouTube video that I posted, the lady was questioning, where did all that copper go? It doesn't seem to be apparently have been used in North America. So I think it was on a trade route going back over to Greece. And if you look for all the uses, apparently copper is used in over 400 types of alloys. So the primary alloys that you can make with copper are bronze and brass, but there's so many others. And then we know they're great for conductors. You can even get a copper tubing and make like a teepee out of it, put it in a bucket with, I forget what, if it's quartz or some kind of aggregate, and you can make what they call cloud busters. Now, if you look online, it'll say, oh, that doesn't work. And oh, yes, it does. What it does is it can change, the environment. And again, I don't know the mechanics of it, but what it can do is if you've got like a cloudy situation overhead, it focuses energy into the ethers and breaks apart those clouds. And I have seen it work, so I know that is true. However, do your own research on that, right? But copper has so many uses. And what do we see? I put these as props next to me. These are just US pennies, okay, made of copper. I think back in the day, they were more true copper. Now, who knows what's in it? I don't think there's much copper in there at all. But what's happening now, the US is trying to take these out of circulation. And, just in common speak, people are like, oh, they're not, it's worthless to have, things for 1 cent. Well, I don't agree with that. I think things, are still worth counting in a much smaller denomination to have that flexibility. Also, there is a different feeling holding copper than, some of these other, thought I had some with me, some of these other coin, or materials or alloys. So, and copper is a really great conductor, and it was said in some of these ancient cultures, copper was worth way more than gold because it was more useful. Um, Also, the next greatest conductor, I think, after copper would be silver, not gold. Gold is like a semiconductor. So, depending on what you're using it for, would determine its worth. So, in this case, too, I wanted to bring up that copper, for example, somehow going hand in hand with ships. I was talking with some others in another group, and you know who you are if you're out there, getting to some really interesting, fascinating discussions with some of these topics. And I do recommend you go over to YouTube channel Higher Vibrations because she has some different groups that get into this stuff, and it's a lot of fun. But anyway, per the last show, I did bring up Titanic in different ways. Now, there was a fun fact for that one, if it can be believed. With the Titanic, I was again looking at here we got a big ship. Did it have any connection with copper? And yeah, supposedly 25% of the recoverable load there was copper, whether it was decoration objects, but it was more than that. I looked into it because then again, you have to search asking the right questions. I asked, yeah, it was supposedly had some wireless transmission, like with their radio, and they had generators and backup generators. How much of that was copper? And I finally got to the answer that they had supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but this is just what came up, supposedly over 200 miles of tinned copper cables on that thing. And there's copper content also in the generators. And then that's why supposedly it sank with the aft or the rear up, because that's where all of the copper, big part of the generators were in the copper content. I don't know, and that's why they say, oh, the lights stayed on very long because the generator equipment was up there. I don't believe all of that part is true. However, go with your intuition and feeling on it, right? I'm just bringing up there's some kind of connection with the copper and the ships, and I know I've hit that home, but there is. Okay, and the salt water and making electricity. So anyway, let me jump back. We were talking about our Greeks and creeks, Indian, Native American Indian connection, North American Indian connection. And I was just bringing up, I'd mentioned it already, but here we've got, a cross section of one of those ships I showed you, and I can never say it right, the triremes or triremes. And so here we have Italy, we've got the Mediterranean down here, and it shows where, the Phoenician peoples were moving around and where the Greeks were. And then I'm not going to get into that too much. I'm just dropping it, a drop and go food for thought. And then over here, so we see Italy down here. So we know, see these little blue routes. Oops, sorry. Let me get this in the right position. It's mirrored, so I always go the wrong way. Forgive me on that. Okay. So here we know shipping was going on here. They explored other, paths up, obviously. So they went past the UK and Ireland, and that's Iceland. And then you got Norway, Sweden, and all that. They're traveling all over. They went straight over, to Iceland, hopping over, Greenland, hopping over. Obviously they went to Greenland because we've got the Danish there. So from Denmark, they, hopped over there. And so, of course, they would find their way through Canada in toward Lake Superior and down, into areas, that to me is like a no-brainer. So there was very fluid, travel and trade. So this whole notion of, oh no, there was nothing pre-Columbian. No, Columbus found it all. Come on. That's all I'm going to say. There's also evidences of a ton of Viking or runic language and carved in on rocks and things up and down the eastern coast of North America. So I don't even want to, what do they say, dignify that with any attention, because we know the whole, I think at this point, the whole Columbus story is just, a farce, or only, little partial truths in there. Certainly not as it's presented. But anyway. Okay. So now I did already touch on the ANKHs and anchor part. I'm going to kind of fly through some of these. So, these are images mostly from the cover that I was showing. Oh, here's that one with the hand coming down and it's holding, this part. So as I was looking, and again, I was kind of looking at an electric angle to this, and I'll explain why in the slide coming up with the ANKH, especially with electricity, is over here is arc welding. In arc welding, it just reminded me of that with the hook and where I'm going next to talk to you about the electricity. And here there's this piece. This is a symbol for one type of welding. And it just kind of reminds me, of this, where we've got a loop and a line. We've got the loop and a line. And then over here, the other symbol looks like, what's happening down here. So this is just, I know, a very loose connection that I'm bringing up. That's a thread that I'm threading in my story and this tapestry. But I'm like, dang it, if that's, you don't put these two together, the loop and the hook, and, too reminiscent of this. Anyway, we'll get going because that's just a very kind of loose connection that I was looking at. All right, so now we'll look at the electrical part. And, everyone's heard of Tesla coils. A movie made it popular in 2010. It was the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Disney put that out. And the kid, there's a kid all into physics. Spoiler alert, he's fascinated with Tesla coils. And anyhow, so that was more of a, instead of Greek gods theme, that was more of a Merlin theme in that movie. Anyway, there's a video I posted on under my posts section, and there's a guy that goes through and explains this pretty well. If you can follow it, it's a lot of technical electrical talk, but he's talking about the coils going up and a plate, and then we've got discharge here. You've got a cord and a box. Well, looking over here at some of the reliefs, these are the famous. They call them the light bulbs, and I posted on my under my post section too, a little YouTube shorts about this. Somebody actually built the model of this. This is coming off of a relief in the Temple Dendera, so in Egypt, and that's the one with the goddess with the cow ears, So anyway, this is on the walls in there. So somebody did a black and white diagram over here. I'll put the link later, when I update my description area below. But this is in German, so a couple of people went through and broke this down of how it works, as far as electrical. And you see these people, they even have like a little thing on their head before touching whatever that surface is. So they're acting as human isolators, and then you've got insulators, you've got all kinds of electrical, that could be the filament, they say. I didn't go through and translate all of this, so I'm not going to rattle it off yet. But anyway, you've got like a cord, you've got a box. So very much like this. So again, even if it's not like typical electrical circuitry, it's something to do with like a Tesla concept or an electrical way that we don't, use here, or maybe we do. But, you look at the pieces put side by side, a lot of the Egyptian figures and the hieroglyphs are holding some kind of rod. It could be a grounding rod. It could be some other kind of charging rod. I don't know. And then you got this thing acting very much like this, and then this, which again, it could be a grounding rod. It could be, I don't know, circulating the electricity. There's another video showing where somebody shows how electricity moves in the loop. And that really is just showing you like the whole thing could be like a filament or something. Anyway, lots of different images, lots of different theories. I'm just throwing it out there because I think it's more than just a symbol of, oh, it's in the burial chamber with the person and they just thought they'll go to the afterlife if they've got this ankh on them. No, there's much more to it. That I know for sure. All right, so now we'll look at, this is a fun portion of the show. This might get a little controversial, which is fine. Wait, before I go to that part, though, I'm going to jump out of order on my own slides. Hang on. Oh, back to the Titanic. I'm going to jump around a lot. Just to touch on the Titanic for a minute. If you look at my previous show, I did talk about that, a certain angle about it with the gods and turf wars. And I should have said like sea wars probably back then with that show. But anyway, there was a lot of discussion, or has been, in different groups and circles, which is great, healthy, great discussion. And everybody has a piece, and there's so much truth to everybody's pieces. But I was just kind of putting it out there, like, because if you look at my previous show that talks about it, I did bring up where I do feel that it was hit by a weaponry from a submarine. It didn't hit the iceberg. I'm not subscribing to that narrative. It's just me. That's how I feel. So I did put it out there, though. I was trying to sleep. I couldn't sleep. That's another thing. If you found this channel, I don't know if you've been getting much sleep lately. I have not been. Just can't. There's something going on cosmologically, not allowing it. Not much anyway. And so I was lying there with wide eyes and I just said, okay, God, help me out, team. My team can be heavenly team, guardian angelics. It can be galactic family. It can be God's source, Jesus, you name it, my higher self. But I'm like, hey, you, everybody, ancestors, people who've passed and gone on, loving people. What's going on with the Titanic? Was it a torpedo or some kind of weaponry hitting it from below? or because that was just 3 years before the Lusitania was known or reported to be sunk by a U-boat, a submarine. So I said, or was it something else? And when I was driving shortly after asking that question, I just put it out there. I looked at the sky, and if you've looked at my channel, I don't even know why I'm doing these discussions on esoteric topics, because my main thing has always been just documenting sky watching things and nature things, and maybe doing some card readings, spiritual things that way. But anyway, it's fun, and I hope you're enjoying these. But anyway, when I asked what was it sunk by a submarine or something, I looked in the sky and I see this. This is the original photo. No enhancements on it whatsoever. Okay. So I'm looking at this. Now, I didn't see it up close like this. This was at a greater distance, but I zoomed in. So, we got tree line and power poles. So it gives you an idea of kind of the scale. So I'm looking and I'm like, oh, come on, because I do enhancements and get down to details of what might be up in here as far as like cloak and craft. If you look at over 200 videos on my channel, I document cloak and craft that just look like clouds, but you look further and you see parts and pieces and you see that they're actually cloak and craft. Anyway, I look at this, and just trained as I am, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a bigger ship or craft. And something is either coming down and hitting it like a cannonball, or a portal is opening up and something's coming out of it, whatever. So usually I get a feeling on this before I visually see something. So in this case, I'm stopped at a traffic light on the road in a car, and something said, point over there and take a picture. So I didn't have time to analyze this while I'm driving. I just know I take a picture and I keep driving. And then I look at this when I get home or to whatever my destination is. But by gut instincts, doing this for over 5.5 years of documenting the skies and really looking and getting new eyes to see, because I was upgraded back in 2018 to see this stuff because I didn't see it before. And anyway, just by looking at it, I know there's a craft, there's something hitting it, interrupting it, or coming out of it, and there's another craft over here, and there was some also around. Okay, so then when we get to the enhancement progression, I'm jumping. I put it on the posts area of my channel. If you want to go look and see more of the progression, there's more slides there. But anyway, so I just drew what we just saw. I just drew a red line over what would have been the main craft in red, and then the green are like little craft. And then there's I have green outlined. There's like a ship, crossing it, what do you call it? T-boning it, right? And then I put the yellow ring. That could be a portal with something coming out of it, or that could be a void, or that could be a solid object hitting down in there. So I don't know what story is going on here, but I know this is a craft down here too, because I could trace 2 rigid triangles on this thing. So it's very, very interesting, the timing of seeing this, because I don't see stuff like this every day. And this was my answer, my divine answer written in the sky to, was it hit with weaponry from a submarine? And I think that was my answer, was yes, because I'm going to hold this back. It's a little bit mappy. It's better to see it on the post section of my channel. But anyway, this is a curve. This is a hard line, okay? So that's the bow of a little ship, a little, looks like a boat. And these things are vertical, So to me, it's very much showing me a nautical type of craft, but in the sky, just by, what do I want to say, going, like perpendicular, cutting through that bigger ship. And this looks like something else coming from above, like a huge cannonball or something. It looks like instead of the portal, there might be a little portal here, but I think this is like a huge ball, like coming down and hitting this whole thing. And I've seen this somewhere before. I've had it documented a few years ago. Something similar coming out of the sky with a trail, hitting into a quote unquote cloud in a weird trajectory. And then with some enhancements, you see it looks like sky battle, that they're, hitting the other thing. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. I won't go down there, but it's a fun one. If you look at some of my other videos on sky watching, you will see some wild stuff captured in the skies over the years. Anyway, I'm just fascinated with that little thing that I'm calling the little boat. Maybe you can see it better now what I'm talking about. So this would be the bow, and this would, what am I saying? Yeah, that would be the bow, that would be the stern, and this would be starboard, and that would be the port side. And it looks like there's even like a little dinghy or a little lifeboat on the back of this thing. Wild, don't you think? And then this is like craft activity happening up here too. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it was showing me enough to know that this looks like a vessel going across the other vessel. And I don't know why something else is hitting it, but another story, another little battle going on. Don't know, but I got my answer for me personally. All right, now we're going to go into an interesting portion of the show. What time is it? Yeah, I'll try to wrap this up. I don't want to make it really long like last time. Let's see, give me a moment. Hang on. Okay, so now it's just kind of like the last little portion of the show where I'm going to put the hippocampus back up because, like we said in the beginning, the hippocampus was connected with the god Poseidon or Neptune, depending on, if you're doing the Greek god, Roman god, all means that sea god. I believe this one is the, if I'm not mistaken, this is at the bottom of the Fountain of Trevi. I think that's where they took this image from. But anyway, we see the horse, we see some wings, and we see the tail. So that's a hippocampus. And then over here, we've got the hippocampus. And then there's one down here. And that was just interesting on a coin. So we've got, the hippocampus beneath. This would have been, one of those triremes, if I say it right, ships, and, the soldiers there. So very interesting. Oh, and I didn't mention, it looks like they've kind of got the headgear on like they could be from Sparta. Going back to the Greek and Crete connection. Again, I didn't get it put into the slides, but in the post section, I have a video where a woman was making the connection of even the headgear of the Native American Indians looks like some of those Sparta, like the brush top kind of headgear. And also in Florida, the Seminoles, I think also I'm not sure if it's the Miccosukee, but definitely the Seminoles and some of the tribes up in North Florida, they would have, hats and like the clothing that they would wear, the tunics and things look very much like, if not Greek, maybe Phoenician, something though influenced from farther east, nothing like, native, no pun intended really on that one, to North America. So anyway, in the clothes and the language and the DNA, everything does show a connection to the Greeks. All right. Oh, and this I just wanted to bring up one more time too, because in this case, there's like some, I don't know what that is, like textile or something, but I think it's hinting at power and movement because again, that's kind of like the top symbol of some of the stuff we were looking at with the electrical, like the welding symbol. Anyway, and he's got a rod, he's got his trident, and it's a rod. And again, to me, that's just all like lightning rod, grounding rod, stuff to do with electricity. And even with the rod, here's another aside, because I was just talking about maybe Sparta and the shape of the headgear. I was reading about what was done before, what civilization didn't have currency. Like there had to be somebody before they started doing coins, like in the Greek culture and whatever, Greek society. So I read it somewhere, and again, I don't know if it's true, fact check me on this, but supposedly people traded iron rods. Not iron. Was it iron? Oh, shoot. I used to know. Either iron or some type of metal rod. And they would, hand those or exchange those somehow. So I don't know if that's true. It sounds interesting. And where that took me directly to pop culture is the movie. It was streaming. It was a Star Wars little offshoot for Boba Fett. I don't remember if it's called the Book of Boba Fett or something. But anyway, in that one, I think it was, wait a minute. Nope, sorry. Boba Fett encountering the Mandalorian. I think it was in the Mandalorian. And so the spoiler alert, the Mandalorian uses Beskar, and that's like a coveted even more than like we would say gold material, because they make chest plates and armor out of it, and it's like bulletproof wear for our universe. And in the Star Wars universe, it's laser proof, like nothing can destroy it pretty much. And anyway, there was a scene where his starship blows up, the Mandalorian, and the only thing left is like this is whatever he has on himself and this one rod of pure Beskar. So I'm wondering if somebody who did the writing for that series kind of knew that thing about the Spartans trading, rods of iron or whatever it was as being valuable. Anyway, just a little thought there. Okay, so let me get into it. So the reason why I'm showing Poseidon is coming up now. So Poseidon or Neptune. Okay. So now I'm going to thread and weave together another little story just to conclude, and I'll try to make this one quick. A lot is happening with storms, and it's tying in with my last show with gods and goddesses and Greeks and the next thing I'm going to tell you, because this is all very public knowledge. You don't have to look far at all. It's nothing like I had any connections. It's just any idiot, lovingly say it, can go look it up like I did. Something was happening around 2019, 2020. With all the distractions, people weren't really onto this. But at the time, I was living in Miami, Florida. And the first thing that got my attention was, I believe it was the order of this, was that all of a sudden, all of the news started saying there's earthquakes. There's been an earthquake on Miami Beach. There's been an earthquake in Brickell Avenue, which is just south of downtown Miami. And then all of a sudden, so it's on Miami Beach, Brickell, and then it jumps over to an area, if you're familiar with it, called Dadeland or Kendall, but way south into the west. So it's like somehow an earthquake. It didn't come up from like Cuba and like move through all of Florida. It just selectively hit like 3 areas, which is impossible. And if you look on a map of the tectonic plates, there's no plates around. Even if you do a search saying, oh, does Miami or, that part of Florida get earthquakes? You're like, no, there are no plates around. So why the heck were there earthquakes? So this inquiring mind wanted to know because, I'm native to Miami, know it for many decades, and no, earthquakes aren't, a thing. So that got me thinking. At the same time, I was given little divine connections here out of the ethers, because at the same time, I happened to look. Now, this is nothing political. I'm not a fan of any politicians whatsoever, the highest levels. I think they're all kind of serving a different master, and it ain't so good. So it's not really pro-humanity. I hope so, but I think we got a lot of shape-shifting energies. We got a lot of not so great energies, and if they're at that level, I'm not buying it that they're like doing stuff for us. I hope I'm wrong. But that being said, I'm not for one camp or the other. There aren't just two camps anyway. That whole divisive nonsense is just that nonsense. But anyway, I'm bringing up a name, not to trigger people or to go like, oh, this person, that person. No, just look at this, not even face value. Okay, this is just putting out something. I'll put it out generically. There's no emotion tied to this. This is just what I saw, and what I'm saying is what I saw on TV as like news reporting. So let me explain what I mean. We're going to now jump down to South Florida, and we're going to look at a secret underwater base, not so secret if you can see it on Google Earth, and it's written up and all this. And it is called Autek Andros Ranges. So there's an island. We're going to look at a little map. Okay. Yeah, if I can get it up here. Hang on. Sorry about this. Again, I'm trying to work with the mirrored thing. Anyway, this is Florida up here, going really down south. Here's, if you see it, Miami, and this is West Palm Beach. Okay. So Andros Island is part of the Bahamas. So you see it, it's off to the east, out in the Atlantic. It's actually within Bermuda Triangle. Fun fact. Okay. So it is one of the largest islands, or the largest island of the Bahamas. Now, the Andros Ranges, and you can look this up, it's AUTEC, and it stands for, oh no, I forgot now. I think it's Atlantic Undersea, oh shoot. Okay, I got to look this up. Hang on. If I don't see it right off the bat, I'm looking this up because I can't believe I forgot. I forget it every time. Anyway, I'll look it up. But anyway, it's an acronym. Let me get my phone. Maybe you can look it up along with me. Hang on. I always forget what it stands for, and I don't know why. I have like a mental block on it. Hold on. So it's an undersea base. I'll just keep talking about it though. And what they do is they track. They have in-air tracking of things. They have submarine capability that can shoot weaponry to take out aircraft. They do simulated nuclear underwater battles, which they say simulated. I'm kind of wondering if they actually do it for real. It's a side note. Hold on. Give me a minute. But anyway, so already we've got an interesting story developing. Okay, it stands for Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Center. And this is just straight up from, doing an internet search. I'll just read it. It says it's a U.S. Navy facility in the Bahamas used for underwater testing and evaluation of weapon systems, sonar, and acoustic sensors. Located in the tongue of the ocean, they call it TOTO, T-O-T-O, tongue of the ocean. Little code there, too. It serves the U.S. Navy, NATO, and allied partners for submarine warfare training. And remember, I was asking the question about the Titanic, was it a submarine? And then I like going down this whole thing about AUTEC, and it's active today. So anyway, let's see if there's anything else interesting in here. It just says the purpose of it is it provides a deep water acoustic environment for testing weapons, sonar, and underwater systems. And hey, we all know that that's going to screw up the mammals and the undersea beautiful living beings down there. So I'm not crazy about this, right? It says it includes 3D tracking, acoustic analysis, and a marine mammal monitoring system. Let's see. And it says it's primarily for U.S. Navy, but it also supports NATO and other allied nations. And let's see. What else? Anything else interesting? No, pretty much. And you guys can go ahead and look more on your own, right? It just says submarine captains, they undergo certification there at that range. So anyway, I don't know. I get a very shifty, shady vibe off of it. See what you think. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, here, I'll just show one more slide before I get into the battle strategy map that I have. Anyway, this is just something off the internet showing, their submarines. This is their logos. This is why I'm bringing it up, because who do we see there? It's not a hippocampus. I don't know if you can see it too well, and I'm sorry about the not seeing. It's not a hippocampus, but it's a seahorse. And what did we say hippocampus though means? Hippo is horse, and the campos is like the sea creature. So instead of the sea creature, we've got the hippo part, the seahorse, right? We just are missing the creature part. But I think that the seahorse is kind of the modern day translation of the hippocampus, and that represents Poseidon, because I still think we've got those jokers, I'll say, if they're doing harm to humanity and life on this planet and Gaia, Mother Earth. Those gods just never left. They're still having air, sea, and water, air, land, and, sea battle going on. And this facility to me proves it, with their logo. I mean, think about it. If they're doing all this stuff, here's they're showing the air transmissions and tracking and whatever. Wouldn't you have a more fearsome logo than the seahorse? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just saying. And then they do actually over here. They have it looks like a headphone on top of a porpoise, a dolphin. Dolphin looks like he's holding a torpedo, and we've got all this electrical charge going on. So that's just, I guess, a patch or badge for the ranges. Now, Andros, it could be named anything, right? What do they name that island? Again, I'm connecting this with the gods that never left, having turf battles, whether it's land, sea, or air. Andros sounds very Greek to me, in the sense that it is sounding Greek. Not that I don't understand what it means. So Andros, what do we have? Androids, phone, Android. That means man, like human, man, or some translations say warrior or male. Okay, so Andros Island, just saying, we got more Greek connections. If my little threaded tapestry keeps bringing those things together. But anyway, why is this important? Why am I talking about it? Well, I'm still kind of jumping back into the God story that never left, because that was really hitting me hard in the last show, and it really bothered me, and it got me thinking about that at all because of this facility. So like I said, here's, Miami down here. Miami Beach is an island off of here. There's another island further south than that called Key Biscayne. Reason why I'm bringing this up is, back to our little report, I cut myself off. There was reports of earthquakes hitting Miami Beach, jumping to Brickell, and then going way west somewhere, 3 isolated places. And again, no tectonic plates would be causing earthquakes in these areas. So what's going on? Well, this is when I found this secret underwater base. Something said to look up any underwater bases, and I found it. And I knew a couple people that were on the beach, on Brickell, on even the island further south. And I was corroborating, because again, this was in the news. Did you feel something? Was there an earthquake? So I got, yes, confirmation that there was like movement felt in those places. However, I talked to somebody in Key Biscayne, the island below where one got hit, and I said, well, if Miami Beach got hit, you guys should feel it in Key Biscayne, one little man-made island down. And they said they didn't. And they said also that it was weird because all the air traffic was being diverted away from Miami Beach and flying over their island, which never happens. So that got me thinking something's going on in the water. And that's how I found that underwater base, because it was just select, pinpoint hitting Miami Beach, but not, if it were a tectonic plate, it would be felt, all the way down. It wouldn't just be like coming in on one point. So anyway, that got me thinking we're talking something military is happening. So I look it up. Now, at the same time, this is why I say I'm not getting political. The character, whoever it is, sitting in the Oval Office, I don't care. Team A, Team B, I don't really care. The person, the character, the role player there at that time happened to be Trump. So he was set to go down and meet, I think, a prime minister or whatever it's called in Poland. And they caught him on the news. Supposedly he was like going from one point to the other. And this is before the whole fake news thing blew up and all of this. So he's just like moving from one point to the other, and the news cameras catch him and they say, hey, Mr. Trump or President Trump, do you what did they say? Like, did you see that the hurricane? Because at the same time all this is happening, a hurricane started coming up, and it was Hurricane Dorian. And it was way down, way away from, anywhere near West Palm Beach where his Mar-a-Lago estate is. And what does Mar-a-Lago mean? We've got sea, Mar-a-Lago is lake, double C theme going on there. And this Trump character is associated with gold. So again, I know I'm going all over the place, but it does kind of tie together at the end. So if we're looking at the gods never left in the turf wars, we've got a figure that is aligning very heavily with the sea and the material of gold. Anyway, he said, wait, what? They said, oh, they say that hurricane is going to go hit West Palm Beach. Now, when you've lived in South Florida and you've gone through a lot of hurricanes, you know that even when it's almost upon you, historically, it's like you never know. It could shift. It could change. You never just leave it out of your sights, and you never know for sure where it's going to land. Unless what? It's weather controlled. Yeah. So for days ahead of this hurricane, where there'd be no way to know where it's going with absolute certainty, the news weathermen were saying, local, in Miami, oh, it's going to West Palm Beach, no question. Even on Key Biscayne, they were saying, oh, it's going to West Palm Beach. How do all these people know it's going to West Palm Beach, right? So that told me, oh, this thing's orchestrated. So then it got me thinking, well, what the hell's going on? What's the connection between West Palm Beach and this there's got to be a connection between West Palm Beach and maybe this underwater base, right? So what do I find out? Yeah, okay. Here's that secret underwater base, and its headquarters is West Palm Beach. So when the reporter said, hey, Trump, did you know it's going to hit, oh, they say the hurricane's going to go hit West Palm Beach. He was jarred, and he turned like ghost white. So, he wasn't expecting that. So to me, these hurricanes are absolutely weather controlled for many reasons beyond this. And he knew, oh, this is weather warfare. So he must not have played nice, or they're trying to force him to do something, the other side of conflict, to pressure him to do something. So what happened? We know it's weather warfare because Hurricane Dorian comes along. Let's see which one it is. This one. And this is very tragic, and it was not talked about as it should have been in the media afterward. This thing sat for 24 hours. I remember watching 18 to 24 hours. The news, real time, I was watching it. It said stationary. It said this system stayed at a category Cat 4 and 5, sitting there stationary for not 1 hour, not 2, but 18 to 24 hours. I mean, officially it says 24 hours. That's impossible. No, it cannot do that unless it's weather controlled or it's something else happening in there. And yet it did. And I talked to locals. It only reports like 250 or something people died. No, I talked to people working from the Bahamas, but working in Miami, who lost 6, 7 family members, never heard from them. There were, images of people just literally being washed out to sea. So I'm sure it did more, harm more people. But anyway, it stayed over there that long. So what's there? Andros Island is right in there, and it just hung there. So what I think happened was they were waiting to see what Trump or whatever leaders in the chair at the time, if they were going to play ball, that's another kind of pun intended, with this group. And if the answer was yes, they were going to send it on somewhere else. If he didn't do what they wanted, I think they were going to have it hit West Palm Beach. But everybody was saying West Palm Beach when this thing was way the heck down, way far away. You can never, predict that with absolute certainty unless it was a deliberate arrow being sent for that target. Just saying. All right, so that was a lot about that. But why did I bring that up too? Because it gets a little more convoluted than this story. So I brought it up because Dorian, again, the names and the symbols, it's the hidden in plain sight. It's the read between lines, and you will know who's doing what to whom. You may not know the why, but you at least know who's behind it. So Dorian, Doric, if you look at the order of columns in antiquity, you have the most simple stripped down, no frills. Column capital is called Doric. Then the middle one is called Ionic. That's the one that looks like it has scrolls on each end. And then the most fancy column at the top, the capital at the top, has the acanthus leaves, and that's called Corinthian. Okay. So anyway, we have Dorian is the name of that hurricane. The one that is directly here, there's some threat. There's a turf war, sea war involved. Okay. Now, later comes Helene. So the moment this one came, this was on the east coast of Florida. Helene, the recent one that really harmed and killed so many in North Carolina, it affected Georgia, Tennessee, parts of Florida, I think even. I don't know if it touched Alabama. This thing was horrific, and it's Helene. So we have the Helenes. This is a Greek, these have Greek names. So anyway, I don't know who's who on these teams, but I'm just saying we had one come from the west and east and one from the west. They're horrible, horrible storms. And they were tied to what I think is ongoing warfare of the gods. And we've got Poseidon sitting there right in the middle, or Neptune, whatever you want to call him. And whether it's a hippocampus or a seahorse or whatever, something's going on here. And it's warfare and it's strategy, and it's controlled warfare. Anyway, just thought that's a fun little story to follow for anybody else who wants to jump down and take a look. You know what, I was just looking here. I just happened to pull this off the internet real quick. But wow, there's something tying this whole story even together, even to the point where they're showing the red and blue. Again, those are the divisive camps. Like this is one camp fighting another camp, And I don't know that, these two could be on the same team. I don't know. But the point is that we also have the red and blue are often attributed to like one warring group or the other. And it just reminds me too, I never got to the explanation of the sails. I always wondered, why did the Vikings, they show it depicted with red and white stripes. Again, where do we get our flag and why? I was just thinking about this the other day. Well, just turn this way. That's why I put the fish in the background. And imagine the fish part is the blue. So the red, white, and the blue. And instead of fish, those are stars. Well, the stars represent the galactics of where some of these entities came from. And I'm not sure about this yet, but I'll get there. But, what do we have? We have red and white used as the different camps. Like if you look at the War of the Roses, they say, in England, you've got the White Rose, the Order of the White Rose, Order of the Red Rose. I mean, again, these are different camps of people in control of the globally, not just one country or the other. And there's a connection with the galactic, with the stars in there too. And then, we have the whole God scenario. So they come from where? Somewhere possibly galactic. I don't know if any are from inner Earth, but, it's a whole other story. All right. So I kind of took us maybe too far, of course, but I think it's okay. I wasn't even going to really touch on that whole other last story. We'll just call it a story. Look it up for yourself, but look at the timing. Timing is everything. Look at the names of these storms and look at what's going on and why certain areas might be targets, what might be going on. And then just to lighten up the mood and now taking us away from the land and sea battle down here on Earth. And again, whatever shape, size, or whatever you deem it to be. I talk about that in my earlier LIVE13 show about what do you think the shape of the Earth is, the true shape of the Earth. But now let's look up into the heavens for a minute. Back to the hippocampus, supposedly Poseidon or Neptune's a steed in the water. Hippocampus, when we look up, there's one. I was looking to see if there's a constellation or something, and I didn't see one, but I saw a nebula is named after hippocampus. And it's also called the Walking Girl. And this is something for you to maybe look up because this printout turned out a little dark. But here you can see like the head and her legs are looks like she's walking, and that might be like a dress, flying behind or scarf. So it's pretty interesting. So it's just a little fun thing to maybe take a look on your own. All right. Well, let me look here real quick before I sign off. And thanks for hopping in the live chat if you were there. Again, sometimes I'm shadow banned, so I only see like somebody and not others. So, I can't really respond. But if you need to reach me or have any comments that aren't posting in the comment section either because of the shadow banning, or any other reason, you can always reach me by email. I include that eventually, when I update all of the description areas and stuff below. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else I want to. Oh, yeah, I did want to mention something else with copper, just as a fun little aside. I don't know how fun, but anyway, there is a whole thing called electroculture. So it's kind of like quote unquote homework or fun work for you. Electroculture, I posted also in the post section of my YouTube channel a little something on how to do your own electroculture to have your gardens grow, exponentially. And it involves copper wire. Also, more things about copper is that, we do have copper content in our blood, supposedly 6%. Also, overall in our body, we have copper traces of it. And there's different foods where we can get more copper, that mineral, whatever you want to call it, from things like key limes. Yeah, I don't know if it's in your area. I don't know if just limes have it, but might be good food for thought, literally, to go look into what has copper content if you just feel you want that. Also, there's those bracelets sold at metaphysical stores and things made of copper, and those are good for like grounding, circulation, and other things. You might want to look into that to see if that's something that resonates with you, just on the subject of copper. And also, when I was talking about electroculture and growing the gardens, I'm wondering if too, copper would have been an important resource, perhaps in even like Babylon, which I talked about in my last show. One of the seven wonders of the world was supposedly the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So we look back in time and history, and either it was desert and they had one hell of a great irrigation system or way to do it, or there was more water back then than we think. But anyway, I was thinking if there wasn't water, maybe there was something to do with electroculture and copper that was helping to make those gardens flourish. Just a thought that hit me later. Let's see. And actually, and kind of going back to the Native American theme, it was said that, they would sing to their gardens to help them grow. And actually, I have tested that out and it does work. Okay. Let's see. Anything else? I think I covered. If I missed anything, who knows if there'll be another show or not. Anyway, I think there's enough food for, I keep saying, one more thing. Looking at the time, it really is just one more thing. Back to the turf wars, and now maybe we've got the Hurricane Dorian is presenting one group and the Hurricane Helene another, all tied back to ancient Greece. What also struck me as very questionable with all of this, and again, reinforcing my theory that there's ongoing turf wars from these ancient gods, maybe not so ancient and still around. When you look at the names of cities, so Athens, Georgia, we've got Athens, Greece. We have in Nashville, and so Athens after Athena, and she happened to be very familiar with war. She would fly out over her armies, it is said, shape-shifted as an owl. So that's representing also, I think she literally had that capability, but the owl also represents wisdom, and so she supposedly was very good and wise in battle strategy. But you look at where Athens is in Georgia, okay? And then you look at also where some of these hurricanes are hitting, and then you look at things like Tennessee. So she's in Georgia, and her presence by name, so Athens, Georgia, Athena. Also in Tennessee, there's that, I've mentioned it in a previous show, that huge 1-to-1 scale Parthenon with her statue in there. And I've been in there and experienced it. So here she is, huge. I forget how many, feet high, just enormous, standing there. And why, again, why is that just standing at that temple? And just up the road is Memphis, right? So anyway, we got a lot of Greek ties, and again, just kind of maybe for fun, keep an eye out on what logos are you seeing, what animals or representations might be tying all of this to some of these Greek battles. Just saying. Okay. Well, it's a little bit of an odd show, but I hope you enjoyed it. And whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a good night, great evening, or daytime, wherever you are. And until next time, we'll see what comes next. If there is a next one, it's always a surprise. the theme and all of that. And I just wish you all the best, whatever you're going through or growing through, as they say. Hopefully all is well in your world. And I send you tremendous peace and love regardless. Till next time, thanks. Bye.